Dillinja is one of the greatest pioneers in jungle and drum and bass music. From his drums and break patterns to his processing and that pulverizing sub bass, you can say he single-handedly created some of the most important vocabulary in drum and bass production. Ja Know Ya Big was one of his seminal tracks, which was released in 1995 on Metalheadz. And in this video, we're gonna deconstruct this track so you can learn 3 important lessons. From aim and break sequencing and processing to time stretching breaks and creating hard-hitting bass. All elements of proper drum and bass and jungle music. And if you're looking for sample packs for drum and bass and jungle production, check out deviantaudio.com. The OG jungle, fragments, and acid lab sample packs are perfect for jungle production. All right, without further ado, let's get it. All right, let's start the aim and pattern in Ja Know Ya Big. And here's the aim and break directly sampled from the track. Actually, I know there's been a couple sample CDs over the years that have provided this exact break. I think it's either Lemon D or Dillinja, who's the mastermind behind this processed aim and break. It's one of the best aim and breaks out there. If you're interested in grabbing this break so you can follow along, check the link down in the description. So to start, if you're using Ableton, what I like to do is just go into break and just go into each of the transients, meaning each of the hits of the aim and break, and adding a warp marker. So that's what I've done here, is that I've located the beginning of the snare, just making sure it snaps onto a perfect 8th note there. This just makes it easier when we start cutting up the break in the arrangement view. So you can see that all the transients start on the grid here. It makes it much easier. If all these were removed, they would all be slightly off the grid. It'll be a bit harder to cut when we're cutting it in the arrangement view. So just add warp markers so you can then snap the transients right on the grid. All right, so once you have that snapped, what I like to do is just look for the main elements of this break. There's a number of hits that are repeated that are unnecessary. And we're doing this in audio this time because it's easier for you guys, especially the beginners, to follow along. Not to mention some of the stutters that Dillinja does can be more easily recreated in the audio warp functions in Ableton. So that's where we're doing it in audio. So let's listen to this break one more time. As you can see, there's a number of kicks that happen a couple times, and we just need one. So I'm just gonna cut the kick and immediately call this kick 1, give it a certain color so we can remember it. And then there's this snare here, and this snare happens here and also here and here. We only need this one, so we'll call this snare 1, and we'll color the snares green. So we don't need this guy. We don't need these guys as well. But we need this guy because this snare is completely different. Remember, the aim and break is played by a live drummer. So the original break is, I think, 4 bars long. And so each snare that is played by the drummer has different nuances that make the snare have a different quality, which is nice because then you have different snares to play with in the aim and break. As you can hear this one, the tone is different compared to this one. And this one comes with a little shuffle here, chicka chicka. And that's very useful. We're gonna start sequencing the break. So I'm gonna just call this snare 2. And I gotta keep the shuffles intact with the snare. It just makes it easier later on. This is exactly the same as this. So we don't need that. Neither do we need that. And then we're gonna keep this. And we'll just call this. Seems like this one isn't cut very well here. You can add a bit of a fade. So that's like a double kick shuffle. I'll just call it double kick. And this will be snare 3. So I'll just name this snare 3, color green. I'll just color the double snare orange because we're going to be using it specifically in a certain part of the pattern. But now we have all the main slices of the snare. Now we have them color coded. It's going to be easier to sequence. All right, let's start with the first 2 bars of Ja Know Ya Big. Now that we have the slices, it's easy to map it out. So it starts with 2 kicks like this. And I just have another audio track where I can drag and drop the correct pieces in place. It just makes it easier this way. And then we have a snare with the shuffle, followed by another one of those. And then we have this kick snare pattern repeated twice like that. All right, that's the first 2 bars. Let's then move on to the next 2 bars. It's pretty much a copy, except the second bar here changes up a little bit. So we're gonna remove this section here. Actually, there's a double kick at the very end, so we're just gonna fill that in right now. And then we have a snare shuffle here. And then we have a shuffle followed by this double kick like that. So now we have this on the next 2 bars. So that's the first 4 bars, and the next 4 is pretty much a copy with a slight variation. So let's move this here and make another copy. At the very end, changes up a little bit. At the very end of this section here is where we have that famous snare stutter. So we're gonna remove this section here. First, there's a kick here, followed by one of these snares. And how we're gonna do this is we're gonna be doing a time stretching. To get the most out of this time stretch, the best is to get most of the kick and snare here, and then we have this section here, and then just make sure your warp is on over here, otherwise you can't stretch it. And simply if you hover over the top right corner of your slice here, you'll see this bracket icon. Now if you hold down shift, this little arrow appears, and this allows you to click and drag and stretch. Okay, and that's the maximum you can drag it by. As you can hear, it's stretched out that sequence there. And what we want to do is go back to the audio. We can double click the slice, and under the warp functions, we want to switch it to texture. This is where we can affect the grain size. Usually I bring flux to 0. Flux just adds some randomness to the grains. Essentially what it is it repeats small granular samples of this section here in order to stretch this break, right? So if we have very small grain size, it'll sound like this. As you increase it, you see, the bigger the grain size, the more stuttery it sounds. Now we want it a bit sounding a bit faster with the stutter, so adjust the grain size, decrease it. A bit faster than that. Probably around 100 or 90. That sounds good to me. You can even punch in the number. There we have it. And we just want to start it where the snare starts to stutter. So listen to where it starts. That could work over there. Cut a slice. And I'm going to create another audio track just so I can start it a bit before this kick here. So we have this. Maybe adjust it a little. Right, we don't need this piece here. We can maybe fade it in or start a bit later here. All right, so we have that nice stutter that's famous from John O. You're Big. Now, a couple more smaller steps here. Dillinja with the kicks. I think he's either doing some time stretching or he's adding a delay effect. But the way I recreated it is just copy a small slice of the kick like this. So you get that stutter on the kick. And we can adjust the fade out on this. Right? That sounds pretty good. And pretty much anywhere there's a kick, there's that stutter. So we'll put that there as well. Variation, we'll leave it out on that slice over here like that. I believe this kick here is supposed to have a stutter. At least one of these kicks. Doesn't have to be exact. It's more for the lesson anyways. But let's stretch out this kick so we can test it out. I'll just bring it down here. Just makes it easier. Again, go back into the slice, change it to texture mode of warping, and adjust the grain size. Yeah, that kick there, that stuttery kick, sounds amazing. right? So that could possibly go in here. Remember offhand exactly where that starts, but it could sound nice here. Let's just check it out. All right, let's hear the whole sequence. If we want to be a little more exact, these little kick stutters could probably bring down the volume by -3 or -6 dB. All right, and that sounded good so far. Let's move on to the bass. All right, let's move on to the bass sounds of Ja Know You're Big, and that really memorable sound that goes it almost has a hum to the sub bass. I've been wanting to recreate this sound for many years now, and recently I figured it out. And by the way, this preset, along with many other drum and bass and jungle presets, are available on Gnarly Volume 2. It's coming out on August 29th, and it may be out already by the time you see this video. To learn more about Gnarly Volume 2, check the link down in the description. While we're at it, here's a few presets from Gnarly Volume 2. Love this 808. This Reese is pretty nasty. Here's some talking basses, very popular right now. Here's a wobble frog. I recreated the string from Just Another Chance by Reese. Anyways, that's just a few presets off Gnarly Volume 2. Learn more down in the links below. And we're going to be doing this in Serum. Let's start with a sine wave under the analog wavetables. Just choose basic shapes. Here's a sine wave, and just on the bottom right, just make sure it's in mono mode so that we can only hit one note at a time. And then bring the octave down by 1. That just gives us a nice sub bass. And then to get that humming sound, it's all done in the filter by increasing the resonance and drive. So let's enable the filter and then increase the drive. So you get that pumping sub bass. Let's increase the resonance. Now the cutoff frequency has to be adjusted until you get that hum. And you kind of have to tweak it, but notice it's around this area here, around 150. Our ranges you can play, adjust to your liking, but anywhere between around 130 to around 200 works. And adjust the resonance to taste. This is how much of that peak frequency or center frequency we raise. You notice it's humming already. And if we increase the drive even more, it's more pronounced. And that's that Ja Know You're Big sound. And to make it kind of swoop in, we're going to be using an envelope, specifically an LFO in envelope mode. And we're going to change this to a 4-bar LFO, just adjust the rate. So it swoops in like that. And just by playing with that, I just figured out you can actually achieve the same thing by automating the drive. So you could either do it like this. You see how it swoops in? But how I originally did it was modulating the cutoff. And you'll have to play with the amount here with this little icon here. And it's sounding tight. And then over in the effects section, the only effects I'm adding is a little bit of EQing. If you need a little more sub bass, then you can use this low shelf here, which brings up the bottom end. Just be careful how much you push, because then it's going to clip. If it's clipping, just adjust the master on the top right. Now, if you want to add a bit of an attack on that sub bass, kind of like an 808, what you can do is you can map envelope 2 to your global master tune and adjust this to taste. It could be 2, it could be 12, whatever you like. And then just bring the sustain down. So you have that attack, but just the decay was nice and quick. So that's a bit too punchy for me. I think just at 2, just adds a little bit of an attack when that bass hits. That's pretty much the Jano Your Big main bass sound. There's one more bass sound in this track, and it's a drop bass. Drop bass is kind of like 808s, which have a pitch bend going down. Essentially, we can recreate this with a sine wave once again. Essentially, we're going to use an envelope. We'll just use LFO 1, make this 1 bar, and make sure it's in envelope mode so it only cycles once. And then in the matrix, we're going to set LFO 1 to map it to the global master tune, just like before. And this time we're going to bring it up to, let's say, 15 semitones. Actually, the number doesn't actually relate to 50. If you want 15 semitones, you have to actually type 15ST. And that'll make the semitones. And apparently 15 semitones is the value of 12. So that's really interesting. So you can see now it does this drop bass sound that bring the octave just down 1. If you'd only have a single octave keyboard, it just makes it easier to reach for the bass notes. Now to make this have a little more attack at the beginning, since this LFO is 1 bar, we can add another point on this grid. Just increase the grid size to 16 so you have more lines. And then you can bring this to around here. So this little part here will have an attack. And we want to bring this up, so easy way to bring it is to turn on the filter and increase the drive like before. Actually, 12 isn't enough for me, so I'm going to increase it up. And this type of bass sound is very common in old school jungle from 94 and so forth. We may want to add an amplitude envelope to make it nice and round. And just to show what I'm talking about, if we bring this into an oscilloscope, you can see it's a straight bass like that. But we want to have a bit of a decay, so we can bring the sustain down by like -3. So you can see it gradually round out. You may want to adjust that so it's clipping. There we go. Adjust the decay to taste. That's a nice and round drop bass. So that first humming bass, we have a pattern like this. It's just 4 notes going from F sharp to A, and then A back down to G. Now, it can be argued if it's back down to F sharp, but for me, it just sounds better at G. And then for the drop bass, it's just 3 notes here, starting from F sharp and going down consecutively on the keyboard roll. And then the second pattern is like this. Just adds more variation when the sub bass changes up. All right, this was simple, just an Amen with some bass, but let's check the track in full. All right, that sounded nice and heavy. All right, hope you guys got something from my recreation of Dillinja's Jano Your Big. A huge part of this journey that we learned from this is about experimentation. Being in the studio and playing with those knobs and settings, sometimes you'll just stumble upon something cool. That's how a lot of these early pioneers discovered the sounds that we love today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to this channel. If you want more jungle or aim and break tutorials, check this playlist up here. Want more modern drum and bass tutorials, check this playlist up here. All right, until the next video, stay creative. Peace out.